All right, well, Jess, I don't want to start you too late. I'm gonna give you your full 10 minutes. So I think we can go ahead and get started. We have about 16 people, and I'm sure they're gonna keep on trickling in. So let's see. So thanks for everybody coming to the Shellfish Training Showcase webinar. We're gonna kick it off with Jess Small, who is the director of the Aquaculture Genetics and Breeding Technology Center over at VIMS. And Jess, I'll just let you go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, great. Thanks, Madeline. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, it's
Yes,
perfect.
okay. I'm just going to make sure that I can actually see it on my end. Okay, and if I click enter, does that go forward for you?
Yes,
Okay,
perfect.
great. All right, so thanks, Madeline. So I've been with ABC about 13 years now, but our workforce development program associated with oyster aquaculture started long before me when Stan Allen was director here. So our oyster aquaculture training program, or OAT as we fondly call it, actually began in 2009. And believe it or not, the funding from that came from an anonymous donor, which is really unheard of these days. I don't know how Stan swung it, but suffice to say, the funding allowed us to bring in 2 to 4 trainees every year. They are provided a stipend back then as well as now, an hourly rate. It's obviously increased over the years to keep up somewhat with inflation. There is no stipend for housing, so that's one issue that we've had with this program. We don't have on-campus dorms to provide folks, so oftentimes if they're not local, they sublet something, etc. Typically, we've had about 20 to 40 applicants yearly for this program. Though it is an internship slash training, they do go through the William & Mary application process. And really what we're looking for is a convincing cover letter as to why folks are interested in participating in this program, that they show they have a real desire to get their foot in the door in shellfish aquaculture. We're not looking necessarily for that straight A student. We really want somebody who genuinely has an interest and a love of this field. And really our minimum requirements are that you've graduated high school and have reliable transportation. Typically our time frame, it's a little bit flexible, but it really is primarily based around our hatchery season, and ABC's hatchery season starts typically the end of February, beginning of March. If the applicant is, for example, in school and can't start until May, we sometimes can work with them to bring them on then. And then the end date is somewhat flexible, though we like to have folks here at least through June or July, so they can see the full gamut of everything that I'm about to discuss. So, as part of that training, you try to hit on a lot of different points. I spend a lot of time in the hatchery, learning aspects of our nursery. I'll discuss what we touch on with the different field components of the training. Also, the participants get experience in the laboratory. We provide them lectures and bring in guest lecturers. They get tours, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we also provide them externships because we are a research facility here, but we are very much aware that what we do is not the same as what folks do at a commercial scale. And so if somebody, for example, has an affinity for algae production, we might send them to another commercial hatchery and they'll work in an algae room for 3 or 4 days, or a nursery or a field or something along those lines. So in terms of the hatchery components, we teach them everything from, your broodstock consideration. So how many, for example, you need to bring in for the goals of your spawn. The different ways that folks can do broodstock conditioning. Over the years, we've had everything from flow through to recirc. We do some natural conditioning, and how you maintain a broodstock conditioning system. Also, all aspects of spawning, so sex identification, how to count eggs, how we assess sperm, how we do fertilization, etc. All of our systems primarily these days, and I apologize, a lot of our pictures are old, of our old facilities. We have a lovely new facility here on campus, the ACOF Center for Aquaculture, which is a lot more shiny and nice to work in relative to this. But as all folks on the call I'm sure know, you can make pretty much anything work if you're a hatchery person. So a lot of our larval production for the breeding program is in batch culture or static tanks. So we teach how to do drops. how to assess larval densities, the importance of stocking density, larval size and health assessments. Also the importance and how to measure water quality parameters like pH, salinity, DO, et cetera, and what parameters are important to keep an eye on, and when they go out of the desirable bounds, how we can fix that. We have a setting system. We primarily set on culch, and so how to set up a downweller system and set eyed larvae, feeding and cleaning a setting system, and how we track growth, and then how we move setters to our nursery. We have a land-based upweller system. Again, this is a picture of our old nursery, but those are some of our silos. So the oats learn, what the upwelling process is relative to downwelling, how many setters we can put in given silos, what we do in terms of flow rates and screen size and how that's important, how we grade, and the importance of restocking and in terms of growth rate, et cetera. And then also participate in either grading or bagging material up to go to any of our field sites. For algae production, with the ACUF Center, we have a lot of really fantastic systems like a continuous hanging bag system. This is a picture of our cow wall system. So they also get to spend some time in the algae room working with the algologists, learning the different species that we grow, the different biochemical compositions of the different species and why we feed what and when we feed. Also how to calculate feeding rates for larvae or for broodstock or for setters, how to read a feeding chart. We all work weekends during hatchery season, and so we get them up to speed so that they can come in and share in that burden, which is admittedly nice, but it's really important that they're confident, for example, in how to feed or wipe down setters or how to check the nursery. In terms of our field sites, ABC has had and still does have a number of different research farms. At times we've had up to 7. These days it's more like 4, not including our project sites. So the oats get to not only participate in field grow out and experiments here at VIMS, but also go to our other field sites. For example, down in Virginia Beach, or even all the way up to one of our sites in Maryland, which is actually about 4 hours from here. So they do get to travel with us and learn the different gear. So, our gear these days includes everything from, rack and bag systems to custom gear. Because we are a research institution, we've been able to get specific permits to have custom gear at some of our sites. They have access to our adjustable longline system, bottom cages, rack and bag, as I said before. And then as I mentioned, our sites span a wide range of locations, but that's because they have a different salinity and different purpose. So for the breeding program, different selection goes on at those different sites, so they learn that as well. As part of it, working with the gear, being able to identify fouling organisms, how we handle that, whether it's air drying, whether it's changing out the gear, recognizing predators and what we do about those, that sort of thing. Our laboratory, there's a lot that goes on there, and they do get some time in there, particularly learning what flow cytometry is and how we do DNA and ploidy assessments. For some of our projects, we do histological sample preservation as well as genetic sample preservation, so we try to give them a rotation in that as well. Over the years, we've given them a number, and we still do try to expose them to a lot of different topics, including, I'll do some lectures on selection and breeding. We might bring in, we always bring in, I should say, like Dr. Ryan Carnegie from the Shellfish Pathology Lab to talk about important shellfish diseases to keep in mind. Folks have also come in and spoke on things like SAV and gear interaction, site selection and permitting, that sort of thing. So we try to really give a really well-rounded experience. And then also tours. So tours to whether it's a shucking house, different commercial facilities, our Eastern Shore lab, and in one year, actually, one of our oats was sent to Taylor Shellfish out on the West Coast for a week. I think they had a particularly big budget that year. And then, kind of as it goes, we also like to kind of push their knowledge and their ability to then interact with the public. So we have like a marine science day that's coming up, and we always have oats participate in that. And it's a really cool experience to see how they can share what they've learned and relay that to the public. We always encourage them in the sense that if they're not really sure of the answer, to make sure that they ask. But that's been a really great way for us to kind of see what they've learned and how they can translate that to the public. Um, so, just kind of wrapping up, I know that was kind of rapid fire, but, a lot of our oats, I'm really proud to say, have ended up in commercial industry. Some of them, like, for example, are running the ACOP Center for Aquaculture. Folks are, either have their own farms or running really big facilities. We've had folks go all the way up, to Maine, down to Florida. So in a lot of commercial companies up and down the East Coast know what oat is, or we have oats there, to the extent that oftentimes, and what works well is if there are companies that have an interest or have a need for a specific hire, they will often reach out to us and say, hey, do you have any oats that might be interested in running a nursery or working in the field? And so it's been a great kind of way then to transition our trainees to actually get a job, because at the end, that's really what we're all about, is trying to not just get people experience, but really get them into these companies or whatever their next step may be. So I know there'll be more questions at the end, but for folks on the webinar today, you can find out more information by either emailing me directly at jamoss@vims or send an email to abc@vims.edu. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Jess. That was awesome. And yeah, like she said, we'll hold off on questions until all the speakers have gone. So we'll just roll right into the next with Megan Gima, who is the program manager for University of Southern Mississippi's Thad Cochran Marine Aquaculture Center. And Megan, if you want to take it over and share your screen.
I did it in the wrong order, but here we go. Okay. And can you see my main slide? It's the presenting.
Perfect.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Madeline. I appreciate being asked to be here and share kind of our new adventure that we've started on with this project. So as Madeline said, I'm Megan Gima. I am the program manager. I manage the oyster aquaculture program for USM, but also I'm transitioning into managing our new marine aquaculture demonstration center. Center is kind of a loose term right now. It's not a brick and mortar location. It's more of a program initially. So this was a project that is newly funded, that we received the funding through GOMESA, which is the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act. And we're really targeting advancing technologies, innovation, and kind of just security for here down on the coast. And so with this project, it's primarily with TCMAC, so our Thad Cochran Marine Aquaculture Center, but we're also working really closely with USM's Gulf Blue, which is a program that is focusing on advancing technologies. Initially, right now it's 6 blue tech innovation sectors, which include uncrewed maritime systems, aquaculture, marine-friendly plastics, ocean and coastal data analytics, smart ports, and sea space systems. And all of those are kind of working with other programs and colleges within USM. So the one I'm talking about today is kind of the aquaculture aspect, which is going to fall. And so our main objective for the Marine Aquaculture Center is we are looking to focus on building a network of expertise, research, innovation, resources to build the capacity for our stakeholders to drive marine aquaculture. And really, we want to focus on a more sustainable, inclusive ecosystem that will increase, our big target words are the food security, our workforce, coastal resiliency, and economic stability. And so with this project, we have 2 main objectives. The first is partnering with businesses and entrepreneurs to address constraints that we see in the development of marine aquaculture. And kind of we broke that down into 2 main aspects, which is focusing on species-centric the applied research to optimize production, and then also the technology aspect. So innovation, where we want to create and demonstrate new technologies. And then the one that I will be focusing on today is that second objective through the center is providing workforce training and hands-on aquaculture opportunities. And so this center, it's going to have a bunch of different projects that are rolling through. And our first one that we've initiated this year is our advanced seed production program. And we're focusing on the oyster hatchery operations. We're collaborating with, TCMAC, but also our Marine Department, our Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. So we're working with some of our staff here in the oyster aquaculture program, Benji Timms and Ben Dozier, myself, and then also 2 staff from the Department of Marine Resources, Jason Ryder and Ellen Coffin. And so this is a new project. We just started, and so we really needed to highlight, to get the support from the state with DMR, kind of what our purpose and the outcomes are. And so really our main purpose is that we want to provide hands-on hatchery training for graduates of our off-bottom oyster aquaculture program, which that program is essentially ran by the state. It's a requirement for our residents to, they have to do that class first before they can get leases on the off-bottom sites. And so we wanted a way to kind of train them in the hatchery operations, because our off-bottom aquaculture is really new. We started in 2018 was the first off-bottom leases that we had in the state. And right now we've identified, seed's hard to come by. And so we wanted to increase just hatchery operations and interest, and kind of lead those that are interested and have the capacity in kind of understanding what that is. So we wanted to utilize a mobile oyster hatchery so they can get hands-on experience, where we're using kind of our water here in the Gulf, because our hatchery operations work on recirculating artificial seawater, which is great for some things, but it's way different than if you're working natural seawater. So we wanted that hatchery to serve as a training site to learn the culture techniques, the processes, everything that's needed to produce that oyster seed. And so, our big goal is to introduce the hatchery operations, kind of guide them through the setup, production, what it's going to take, what kind of commitment that takes. And then long term, we're really hoping that the program will continue and to really lower kind of the startup barriers, expand seed production and availability, and then overall strengthen Mississippi's aquaculture sector. So then kind of getting into our class. So we recruited folks that had completed that course, and we initially had a information session. Basically, we wanted to tell them what they were getting into, how much time it was going to take. And so we wanted to also highlight kind of the benefits to the industry. We wanted to increase seed availability, kind of decrease those skills gaps that we need for the hatchery operations, and just the skills. I already kind of talked about reducing those barriers for entry, but we wanted to provide them some actual, we don't want them to have to recreate the wheel. So we want to provide them with as much documents, information that we can give them, so they have that right off the bat when they take off, if they are interested in going forward. And then ultimately, the end goal is creating these jobs. So it's kind of the snowball effect. You have this new industry, they need seed. We have these weekend warriors that we call them. They have their primary job, they're working their farm on the weekends, but to expand their operations and to really grow, they need more seed availability. To get that seed availability, we need to have those options. But in order for people to be invested in putting time into learning it, starting up hatcheries, they have to have a need for it. So we're kind of trying to hit all of those aspects of it. So one of the big things is really empowering our industry to kind of have industry produce seed, the grow out, broodstock, kind of the full gamut, and really encourage that self-sufficiency and innovation within their industry. The second is that we're hoping that this program will, or not second, but one of the other aspects is that we want this community engagement. We want to use this to kind of highlight, identify, and put aquaculture, oyster aquaculture in specific, into a nice positive light. And then building those relationships between the universities, the community colleges, and our industry groups, as well as our, Department of Marine Resources. So when we brought them in, we kind of told them all these things. And so we kind of broke down what and I'm going to tell you today what our program overview and kind of what we're targeting. We're going to have, for our training and education, is our we're going to have 5 intensive classroom and workplace sessions over kind of the 3 months. We opened it up to 10 participants. We have 9. And we're going to cover things like the hatchery operations, larval culture production, and general aquaculture techniques for the hatchery. All these people have been involved in oyster aquaculture off bottom part of it, so they know that part. We're going to utilize hands-on, so the mobile hatcheries, when they'll get 2 full spawning cycles for the first year, because we were kind of getting started late and we had to fit it in, and this is kind of our first run with it. But we hope in subsequent seasons we'll have up to 6 runs that they get to participate in. But it's also, that site-specific, utilizing Mississippi waters and our low salinity, and just kind of dealing with all those aspects that you're going to deal with if you're running a hatchery. And we want to provide at the end those quick reference guides, best practices, and kind of set them up for that long-term success. So I'm going to see, I got about a minute left here. But so our 5 in-class sessions are about an hour and a half to an hour sitting in the classroom. We have presentations. We're going through the documents that we're going to be presenting for the day, kind of some of the things that we're going to be running through. And we've done 2 of those classes thus far, and they're happening on Saturdays from 8 to 12. The first one was kind of going over water quality management, broodstock conditioning. And then the second that we just did this past Saturday was the larval culture and health. So we did the classroom portion, and then we bring them into our facilities and have them do hands-on. So they ran through and used all the meters. The first time they took the documents that we talked about, collected the data. And then the larval culture we set up so that they could drain down tanks. They kind of got in teams. They physically did it. They counted, they measured, they restocked, decided what feed was going into it. And at the end, they got all those documents in hand, but then we also sent them to them electronic copies. And I was going to kind of go through kind of some of the things that we provided, which, these were in the presentation. So we provided optimal parameters. They got those electronic copies also of what this meant, how to adjust it, all the gamut of meters that you can use, from a normal thermometer to a digital one. Basically, there's all these in between. You just kind of have to find what fits, but they got practice on all of them. Went through looking at broodstock. What we found with our off-bottom growers is that they know oysters and the traits that they need for consumption and harvest, but they don't really know what to key into a lot of times for like a good ripe broodstock. So this one's nice and plump, but not quite ready. And then, provided all these documents. So I was just going to run through because I want to be cognizant of our time. These are some of the things that we went through. So we gave them this kind of cheat sheet of what we went through in each class, the documents that they got. We gave them a list of commodities, so where they can purchase them from, what they're used for, examples of vendors. And then, kind of our drop-down schedule explained that this isn't what it's going to be for everybody. They're going to have to change this based off their water, their operations. But it just gave them a real nice idea of like where to start from. Let's see. Our mobile hatchery run, which we haven't got to, that'll be in the conclusion of their 5th class. Then they'll do these 2 runs. And I'm sure all of you have seen or heard, it's the oyster seed holding mobile hatchery that we're going to be using. It's delivered. It's here on site. So we're excited to get into it. And that's all I have. I know that was quick and dirty. But like Madeline said, I had this for questions, but we'll hold those till everybody presents. So that's kind of where we're starting. I can't wait to hear what everybody else is doing too, because I'm learning from everybody. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Megan. And I'm so sorry. It's Gima, not Gima, right?
Yeah, but that's okay because I'll answer. Everybody calls.
I
It's fine.
I know, but I'm sorry. I understand as a fellow Pitsenbarger, I know.
Yep.
That's awesome. Thanks so much. I'm so excited to see the mobile oyster hatchery as well.
Yeah. We'll see how it runs and how it does. I know our students or the cohort is really excited to get into it. So
That's so awesome. So yeah,
thank
we'll hold questions to the end and we'll go ahead and move into Andrea Tarnecki, who is the Assistant Extension Professor with the Auburn Shellfish Lab over at Auburn University.
Thank you, Madeline. All right. Hopefully you're seeing the right thing here. So I am Andrea Tarnecki, as Madeline said, and I'm going to talk about the shellfish training we have that's currently focused in Alabama and Mississippi. And you know, we love acronyms, so it's called the COAST program. I'll tell you what that stands for here in a second. But I wanted to thank Russell Grice, who is an oyster aquaculture business specialist at the Auburn University Shellfish Lab, and he has done a lot of the work with getting this program up and running. And then I also want to thank, if I can figure out how to change slides, which can't apparently. All right. Sea Grant for funding this project. So we are currently in our second phase of the COAST program, and we are really gracious to have been funded through Sea Grant for both of these phases, and we're really excited with the potential of continuing this program on. So the COAST program is a commercial oyster aquaculture sector training program. It is essentially an apprenticeship program. It was developed as a workforce development initiative to recruit and train workers for the off-bottom oyster aquaculture industry in Mississippi and Alabama to help meet industry demands. So one of the common things you hear about probably everywhere, but I know down here is lack of workforce to expand the farm and do all the production that these growers need to do. So we wanted to provide a mechanism to increase the available workforce. And the initial goal of this program was not just for hatcheries, nurseries, and farms, but also processors, restaurants, pretty much anybody that has a hand in the oyster aquaculture industry. So when we started with phase one, which we received the funding in 2024, and that program ran through 2026, the funds were available to support 10 apprentices over those 2 years. We had basically $5,400 per participant to pay the apprentice, and then being Sea Grant, there's match required. And so we set this up so that the participating business would match 50%, and all of that match would go directly to the apprentice as well. So basically, they were able to hire labor at essentially half price. Um, this started out as the format was really based on the industry needs. So the specific farm, I'm going to say farm in this case, because in Coast One, all of the participants were farms. They got to decide exactly how they wanted to spend that money and what they wanted to train on and what their business needed. So we had some that paid part-time, some that paid full-time, although you can imagine that amount of money doesn't last forever when you're doing that. But they got to, you know, decide hourly wage based on their business and their training priorities. So this was really a very industry-driven apprenticeship program. And we were there, you know, to help out where needed with the funding and helping to find apprentices if that was necessary. But what we found was that most of these farms already had people that wanted to work there and they just didn't have the money to bring them on. So we didn't have to do too much recruiting in terms of participants. Um, Jess mentioned that for their program, there's no housing. We also have that similar issue. So, you know, down here, a lot of our farms are located in pretty remote areas, or they're located in very expensive areas. So, it is difficult in this program, at least in phase 1, to bring in people from other locations. So a lot of our participants were very local to the area. For phase 1, we have 8 participants completed and 2 that are continuing this year, and they're listed here. We had 4 in Alabama and 6 in Mississippi, so we had a pretty even distribution. And a lot of these are also signed up for Coast Phase 2, which I'll talk about in a second. So at the beginning and the end of the apprenticeship, we did give out knowledge assessments to both the farmers and the apprentices. Listed here on the bottom are some of the things that these apprentices were trained on in the program. So we did have a few hatcheries that are also farms participating. So some apprentices learned spawning and larval rearing. We had some nurseries, so seed maintenance and counting small seed, and then a lot on the farm side for gear maintenance, handling the oysters, dealing with desiccation, record keeping, and even some food handling and food prep. And one thing we didn't think to include on here was business management. So we'll add that in for our next iteration. But I just wanted to point out that the farmers and the apprentices had pretty much the same responses to each of these categories. So the apprentices definitely feel like they learned something and the farmers agreed, which is nice to see. So in part of our questionnaire, we asked the farmers and the apprentices, would you participate again? For the apprentices more specifically, do you plan to continue working in the oyster industry? And all of our participants said yes, which is wonderful news. We did get a little bit of feedback. The farmers wanted something a little more structured, some more formal training that was provided by us. And there was also the complaint that $5,400 isn't enough money to bring someone on full time. So a lot of these apprentices weren't able to leave their full-time jobs to work in the industry. Despite that, we have a number of success stories that have come out of this. I mentioned the business management side because our apprentice at Navy Cove has been made a business partner since the Coast program, which is incredible. We have a farm manager now, an operations manager, someone that's moved from skipper to senior oysterman, and then, other apprentices that are still employed or hoping to come back after school. So that's 7 out of the 8 that have completed the program so far. So that's pretty good. So moving on to Coast Phase 2, luckily we had much more money available this time. We originally budgeted for 6 part-time and 4 full-time apprentices for a year, estimated at $20 an hour. So based on that, we set up this application process for businesses that were interested in participating, and their max amount would be $41,600. But of course, we got way more interest than we expected. We ended up getting requests for more than double the amount of money we had. So we had to cut everybody back, but we were able to award 12 businesses, 5 in Alabama and 7 Mississippi, ranging from $9,500 to $23,750. And that was a proportion based on what they requested in their application. So this year, because there was a request for more formal training, we are asking that the apprentices complete the online oyster culture course. It's free for everybody. It's about 8 hours of content. It gets a certificate at the end, so that they can, transfer that certificate to another farm, or if they plan on leaving and joining another business. We also have funds for travel, so we're hoping to send the apprentices to the Oyster South Symposium so that they can network with the rest of the industry. And we will also be holding a number of extension workshops with water quality, business management, all sorts of different topics. And so we will encourage attendance at those. We don't have funding for all of those, but they will be relatively local. We'll spread them out between Alabama and Mississippi, so hopefully we can get a good number of the apprentices to attend. And then, of course, we'll do our pre and post questionnaire, see how we can improve the program, and hopefully look for a Coast Phase 3. So that was very short and sweet. Thank you again for having me, and I'll be here for questions at the end, but just in case, here's contact information for myself and for Rusty.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was awesome. Hopefully Coast Phase 3 happens and goes well, and you can have Coast Phase 20
Yes.
eventually.
Fingers
Uh,
crossed.
All right, so next up we have Danny Badger, who is a Marine Extension Specialist with MIT Sea Grant, and I'll let you take it over.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm going to be sharing, we have a lot going on with workforce development in the aquaculture space, and I'm going to just share one of the efforts we have underway. And this is a full partnership between MIT Sea Grant, Hui Sea Grant, and Cape Cod Cooperative Extension. And is this bar in the way? Hold on. I'm sorry. See if I can get that out of the way. Okay. So just a first quick primer of what our industry looks like many other places, it's growing. It's a lot of shellfish, but not exclusively. And it's a substantial part of our blue economy. So it's our seafood economy. And our state's agency focused on workforce development, Mass Hire, has identified aquaculture as one of those sectors that is poised to grow substantially, but that growth will be limited because of the barriers to accessing the workforce necessary to support that growth. So it's certainly a lot of support within the state, and a lot of interest. And the farms we have a lot of them, and they are all generally really small. We have a lot of intertidal operations, which could mean that we could bring in a workforce who may or may not be comfortable on boats, because some of these farms you're just walking out to or driving out to. But in Massachusetts, one of the unique things we have is we have home rule. So every town can manage whether and how you do aquaculture. So there's quite the tapestry in which the industry tries to have a cohesive approach to a lot of the challenges, such as bringing in the right workforce. And when we look at who is available to access this industry, 2/3 of high school graduates go on to college, and most colleges don't have fisheries or aquaculture degrees. But we don't want to lose sight of that 1/3 of high school grads who don't go on to college. And how are we accessing them into this blue economy? Is there a way to connect them to the aquaculture industry? So that was really what we wanted to focus on are those people who are not going through the collegiate system. And we did this is nothing new for probably all of you, but there's a whole lot of barriers to getting access to to all of the workforce. A couple of key points I wanted to pull out. As it was mentioned before, it's expensive. Because we are operating along the coast, all of these towns along Massachusetts coast are pretty affluent. And so there's some big housing and transportation costs incurred by even exploring this industry. But there's one of the big pieces has also been there's a cultural disconnect for people who have not grown up on the water. The aquaculture space can be really intimidating. One of the things I always fall back on is I used to work at the New England Aquarium, where we would work with 16-year-olds who would come and apply for a job because we engaged their guidance counselor. And when they came for their interview at the aquarium, these are people who grew up 1 mile from the ocean as a crow flies, and they had never seen the ocean until they came to the aquarium that day. It really kind of woke me to, there's a lot of really strong workers who could feasibly get to these sites, but they because of that experience of not growing up on the water, they were very uncomfortable even being on the beach. And so as we try to access this workforce, we want to weave in supports to make sure that they're going to feel comfortable when they try to reach into it. So we decided to do a couple of a pilot program. We had not done an internship program before. We wanted to specifically target those who were not going through college, and we needed to bring them into this very small mom and pop operation of that is the tapestry of aquaculture in Massachusetts. And the idea was not to just bring them into to grow outs, but as was mentioned before, recognizing that there's other parts of the sector, the hatcheries, the regulators, distributors, and suppliers. And we wanted to bring our trainees and our interns into an experience that would give them context of what this sector is, and also give opportunity for the sector to see who's going to be the best fit. The way we structured it was to have 2 weeks of training. So we did it fairly intensely, where a week of online training, including OSHA 10 training, and then we had 1 week where everybody came together and we provided first aid, CPR, small boat handling, shellfish biology, and a whole slew of skills that we thought would be applicable. We had done a pre-survey with our industry asking what kind of skills they needed, what were the priorities for new staff. And honestly, we primarily heard they just need to be able to show up on time, sober, and count to 100. And that was the extent of the guidance we really received. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. And so we try to weave in a lot of our assumptions of what were necessary for farm hands. Following that training, we wanted to give that exposure to different elements of the sector. So we had each intern spend 1 week at a different site for 3 weeks. So they would spend a week at a farm, then spend a week at a hatchery, then spend a week with a regulator. It served 2 purposes. One was to give them that better context, but also 2, it provided an extended interview for the host site to see, is this person a good fit for the culture, the vibe of our operation? Once they did all that, and throughout the training and rotations, we were providing $17.50 an hour, and we provided all the housing. So we sought out and secured all of the housing for those 5 weeks or 4 weeks of in-person. After that, they were eligible to be hired by host sites. We did not require any host sites to hire anybody, and we did not guarantee any trainees that you're going to get something out of this, other than the training and the rotations. Those who got hired we would subsidize their wages. We set it up so that we would reimburse each host site for 15% of the wages for the first 4 weeks, and then for the next quarter we reimbursed 20%, and then we increased it to 25% for the final quarter of the year. And the idea being, we wanted to incentivize our host sites to stick with the program. If somebody was a little rough around the edges, there would be additional incentive for them to stick with this person. That really never came into play, but it was part of our intentional design. And throughout that whole time, on top of their wages, they were required to get $17.50 an hour and be given at least 30 hours of work a week. We also gave a housing stipend to support both housing and transportation. We had 8 people who came through our training and rotations. And we actually had a couple people who identified after doing all the rotations, this was not the sector for them. They were really gung-ho when they came in. And by the time we were done, they realized this is not a right fit. And we count that as a win. We've heard from a lot of growers that they are often having somebody come in for a couple weeks, and then once they realize how hard this job can be, they leave. That's a big investment by the host or by the employer, that we wanted to try to remove that and weed them out before they got into the payroll of the employers. We ultimately had 3 people who did get placed with farms, and 2 farms and a regulator. And all 3 finished the program, and all 3 are continuing with the program. And we also had 1 person become a full partner for one of those farms and is helping to review applicants for this next year. So we had a lot of lessons learned. It was a pilot program. We did find that one of the big takeaways is we need to do a better screening. We had intentionally reduced the application load, with the idea being we didn't want to exclude somebody who couldn't write a good essay, because that did not necessarily translate to being a really good farmhand. But I don't think that we sufficiently conveyed to all the applicants how hard of a job this is, what kind of work ethic they really need to bring to bear. So we had a few applicants, a few trainees who just didn't quite live up to snuff there. So that's something we're gonna focus more on. The other big piece was those rotations were specifically appreciated by some key host sites, but many people did note that a week was more than enough. It was a little overkill in terms of trying to figure out if somebody is a good fit, and logistically finding housing for all of those people was really tough. That was not sustainable on our end. There are also some feedback that the training was quite a bit of overkill. They liked that they had all that background knowledge, but it wasn't really necessary. We had some leftover funding, so we are doing another approach this year. This was going to be another pilot where we are changing things up quite a bit. The name of the game this year will be flexibility. We recruited through having some industry briefs with Mass Hire, their state agency focused on workforce development, and Mass Ability, a state agency focused on engaging people who have been struggling in the workforce because of a prior disability. And we're going to just have them do basic training. We are going to pay them a small bit to do the East Coast Shellfish Growers Association's online farmhand training course. Just recognizing that many of these people, they can't really stomach not getting paid for time that they're putting into this. So just giving a little bit for just that basic training. And then giving the opportunity for the host sites to provide tours, or if they have a big project they need to work through, that for which 5 extra hands would be great for one day. We can have 5 potential interns come over, and that provides them a kind of an extended interview opportunity. We are in the midst of this, so I can't have any takeaways. Maybe I'll be able to update this slide in about a week and a half. But then once everybody gets placed, they'll get supported again with a 20% subsidy for the wages and a housing subsidy for 6 months of an internship. And so I just want to end with thanking all of the guinea pigs that worked with us last year. And we have some new people coming in this year as well. We're getting to expand to suppliers and other parts of the sector, which is really, really exciting. So with that, thank you, and I'll close it out.
Cool. Thank you so much, Danny. That's awesome. I look forward to seeing how this the second pilot program goes. Good luck.
Me too.
I'm sure it'll wrap up nicely. So everybody's gone. We can open it up to questions for the last 10 minutes, and feel free to just get off of mute or pop them in the chat too.
Hey everybody, it's Joe at the AIE. Sorry, I've been on another call, but I was able to catch some of the presentations. I just wanted to thank all of the presenters for doing this panel. I think it's really exciting, and I'm hoping we can do more. I wanted to share our YouTube channel in case people wanted to share the recording of this. We usually will post it by the end of the week. And also for any aquaculture training programs, we're doing a virtual job fair with the National Aquaculture Association in July, and we are looking for training programs to sign on to it. We already have programs like Minorities in Aquaculture and the New Jersey Aquaculture Shellfish Training Program, ASAP, signed on. So we would love to have you. We have 15 employers signed up so far. So yeah, we're looking forward to that. And then just a really big shout out to Madeline for moderating. Yeah, if you think she did a good job, throw a thumbs up or a heart react.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Danny. So if nobody has a question yet, I have a couple, and thanks, Jess. I have one for Megan. I know y'all are trying to get people trained in the hatcheries in order to maybe get more hatcheries going in Mississippi. Are there any right now in the state, and like how many? And
Yes, so we have, last year was kind of the first time that we had one main player that came online, and they expanded their operations this winter so they can produce more. And then we've got 2 additional hatcheries, one that's pretty significant size. They're currently in the build out of their hatchery. They've got seawater running through it right now. They're hoping to do a spawn here in the next couple weeks. And 2 of them in that, they're in the program now. And then we have another, it's a much smaller operation. And his daughter actually did a internship with us all summer last year in the hatchery. And so she's helping him with that part of it. So they're new and they're small, but they're definitely starting to kind of come online. And I think, you know, this training or this cohort that we had, you know, we were targeting those that were already in the industry through the off bottom to, you know, to kind of really target if any of them, they expressed interest in possibly, but they wanted to know everything that was going to take to do it. And I think in subsequent years, we'll open it up to a much broader like audience. You know, we want to target those coming out of high school or in some of our community colleges. And where we envision the subsequent cohorts more of like the supporting roles in the hatchery to being able, and some of them may still want to open up their own too, but we kind of see it evolving of who the target is as we, because there's only going to be so many hatcheries, right?
Yeah,
I
that's
do.
really cool. That's awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
And Joe has a question for Andrea. He says, you mentioned sending trainees to Oyster South. Is there any specific networking portion for aquaculture trainees at that event?
There's not a specific portion. Pretty much the whole event is a networking event. Um, so, you know, a lot of the Oyster South Symposium is very industry oriented. Um, you know, they have panels on various topics, some scientific presentations, a trade show. Some of the farms have their own booths, and then there's a shuck and tell event at the end where farms from across the US come, or across the coast, I guess, come and bring their oysters for people to taste. So it's a very social event, and it's a great opportunity just to meet people from a variety of places. So even though it's Oyster South, we do get people from, you know, the Northeast and the Pacific Coast also at that event. So it's our hope basically that they can just meet more people in the field and talk to them about what they're interested in and learn more.
Yeah, I was second that. It's a huge networking event. The whole thing.
Yeah, I
So
haven't been
cool.
yet, but I would love to go at some
Oh,
point.
Joe, you have to go. If you're
Gonna
running
be in
AIE,
Texas next year.
yeah, you have to come promote AIE next year.
Sounds good.
Uh, I'll give a couple more minutes for anybody else that has some questions popping in. I have another one, and this is more to like help me, honestly. We at VIMS, I guess I've had trouble trying to find or target the right trainees for this program or for our programs. As you know, when you see a job posting through VIMS, most of the time you have people looking on those job boards that want to do research. And so we have had a hard time finding trainees that are actually interested in and working hands-on, and people that may are not going college route. Has anybody had like ways to try to help that and find your target audience?
I think I will say for us this year, we've had a really good success with working with this group called Mass Hire, who anybody who's out of work if to get unemployment, they have to work with Mass Hire. And so those agents are really well connected with the type of work people are looking for. So for our industry brief that we did, it was interesting because they made sure that they really looked broadly about who they could bring into the room for us, but they only brought in people who would be serious contenders. So we only had 4 people show up for our industry brief, but all 4 ended up applying, and they were really, really engaged. I think I keep looking at if somebody is willing to do anything having to do with farm work, that's I mean, everybody is aware of farms, of terrestrial farms. And if we go to coastal adjacent communities, they really are not thinking about ocean farms. So there is an opportunity to tap into those communities.
Danny, was that organization like a Tempire type place?
It's more of they just try to connect the workforce to employers, and they do a lot of coaching. They provide some training programs, but they really just seem to be that counselor for those out of work.
And Madeline, I don't, I'm taking it back several steps, I guess. And I think, for many of the past years in high schools, we've really pushed a lot on, 4-year degrees, 2-year degrees, and we've kind of went away from these like hard skills, this workforce that is more technical skills, the farming, because I think a lot of those jobs were already filled, but we're starting to really see a lot of that that demographic retiring. So we're going to have a lot more of those jobs are opening up. So I think twofold is that we've got to kind of start putting that into the high school realm of that these are jobs, they understand that they are, hands-on, getting your feet dirty, your hands dirty, but they're really rewarding. Because I think that the jobs that had, the dirty jobs got kind of a bad rep. And I think that there's a lot of people that we're missing that are good, that would be really good fit for aquaculture. Kind of like Danny was saying that, they just don't know that they're out there. So I think really we've targeted a lot with our CTE, so our career and technology education programs in our high schools of really getting into what aquaculture is, what the types of jobs that are available. And then a step further is kind of getting them involved and coming to work with us. We have, an intern program, and some of them get here and they're like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. I want to be behind a computer. I want to be in a lab that's clean. And then others really, they're like, we had no idea that this could be my job, that I could go out on a boat, be outside. So I think it's really just, we've got to start kind of going back to the high school or K through 12 period and kind of showing that these are jobs that are available and rewarding and fun, and they exist. And they can be good jobs.
I also think as we highlight the industry and the breadth of the industry, people can find their own path within it. So, as we were targeting hatcheries because there could be people who don't want to work outside. We are targeting warehouses because there are people for whom they want to drive a forklift. They love that environment, but being part of the seafood sector, it not only brings in a certain element of pride in what they're doing, but it also provides an opportunity for a market expansion or marketing opportunity for the industry to reach new audiences, to help them recognize, right, the seafood industry is right here in our backyard and is important.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree too. And I wonder too, like with with how the farms and the seasons work with high schoolers getting out and graduating a little later than when we would want them to start. I think that
Hard.
that's a challenge too. But maybe it's worth holding off until they get out and trying to start the program then, or just making sure we hit those high schools when they're juniors and seniors, and then hoping that they're still around, the next year for the next spring or whatever. I don't know how that would be. Maybe pushing it back or something. So, and oh, you go, Danny.
No. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, so me and Jess too, like we have a lot of constraints with how, at VIMS, how we can, our job postings and how long they have to be and the stuff we have to say for William & Mary and VIMS. And I think it's hard when somebody that would be interested in, a hands-on job is probably not somebody that's also going to be reading through all that fluff in the job application. You kind of scroll a couple times before you get to it. So I think that has been one of our main challenges as well, trying to work around that, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think trying to work within our systems is really, really challenging. And I mean, for our program, we were hiring people who were not students anywhere, who work not at MIT and had no affiliation, and it sent some admins into a struggle of brain. And so massaging those relationships is really, really key of how do we get the admins to understand the value and the purpose of what we're doing. So I think that cannot be lost on that's the sticky wicket in a lot of this. The other piece I wanted to bring up was if one thing that we keep seeing with high schoolers is that these farms are accessing high schoolers in their coastal communities that are fairly affluent already. And so they will get somebody to work for a summer or two, and then those no longer kids are getting family pressure to be making six figures fairly quickly. That's not going to happen as a farmhand. And so they are being pushed out, and we're seeing a lot of turnover. That's a lot of investment that goes out the window. A lot of farmers just kind of accept that as that's the way the business is. But if we can find the people who are looking for a career in hands-on work, I think that's really key for longevity of our industries.
And I kind of parallel that with like terrestrial farming, so those are operations that, do they have the same problems? Do they get those summer, high school kids that are coming in and they kind of transition out, or like, I don't know, I kind of always try to go back to the other farming operations and kind of how they have tackled some of these hurdles. And I mean, I don't know the answer, but they're not making six figures. Most of them are not, but so it's like, how are they? And I don't know if it's because there's more of an investment from federal, state, like government, and support with that, because it is such a huge food security aspect. Whereas we just haven't, I don't know if it's convinced or got that clout that, aquaculture, oyster aquaculture is also a really major player and will be, I assume, in food security. And we just need to keep getting that support from governmental, all the different government stages.
Yeah, I agree. I see that too. And go back to agriculture or land agriculture. You see those people, I think they have a similar problem, but also it's so generational, it gets handed down.
This is true too. Yeah.
But yeah, I want to be respectful of everybody's time. It's 5 minutes past 1, so I just really like to thank all of our speakers for being here and taking the time to present. And if anybody else has any questions, they can email me as well. I'll drop my email down in the chat. But yeah, thank you, everybody. I hope y'all have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, everybody.